evening. Today is March 27th, 2025, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I will now call the regular meeting of the District 191 Board of Education to order. Welcome to those of you who are in the audience and those watching online. Director Alt, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin our meeting this evening, we are going to take this time to do the oath of office for our newly appointed school board member, Tyler Saxe. Director Saxe was appointed by the Board of Education during our February 13th, 2025 meeting and has finished the 30-day public input period and will now serve the remainder of Director Marsal's vacant position, which will expire on the first Monday in January 2027. He has completed the necessary paperwork as required by law, including the acceptance of office and oath of office. While he has already taken his official oath of office at the time of his acceptance, we would like to do a ceremonial oath of office at this time. So now I would like to ask Tyler to join me down in the front of the dais. It is an honor that you were selected to guide the education of our community, of our community's children. As you recite the oath of office, you assume a tremendous responsibility as a director of our school district with the duties empowered by the Minnesota legislature. This power puts you and the other members of our school board in the position of being both morally and legally responsible for equitable, quality education of every student in the district. In carrying out this responsibility, you will be asked to fulfill the roles of vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. In providing vision, the board, with extensive participation of the community, envisions the community's educational future and then formulates the goals, defines the outcomes, and sets the course of the public schools. To achieve the vision, the board establishes a structure and creates an environment designed to ensure all students the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. Because as a board we must be accountable to the community, we must ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement in all conditions affecting the education of our children. As board members, we serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students in our community schools to advance the vision of our schools. Furthermore, we must strive to work together and with the superintendent and staff to lead the district toward fulfilling the vision we have created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills and knowledge, citizenship, and personal development. Having signed the acceptance of oath and oath of office, will you please publicly affirm your commitment by repeating the oath of office after me? Director Saxe, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I affirm that I will support the Constitution.
I affirm that I will support the Constitution
of the United States and of this state.
Of the United States and of this state.
And that I will discharge faithfully.
That I will discharge faithfully.
The duties of the office of school board member.
The duties of the office of school board member.
Of Independent School District number 191.
Independent School District number 191.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Be seated. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume.
Second.
Seconded by Director Chester. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. We will start off this evening's meeting with the Student Performance and Achievement Committee report on addressing disparities. academic, multilingual, and discipline exclusion from Isis Buchanan, Director of Educational Equity, Amina Oftedal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, and Amy Petrowski, Director of Student Support Services. Welcome, everyone.
Good evening, Board Chair Werb, Dr. Belmont, members of the board. This evening we're here to share some data and some information upon the actions and strategies that staff are taking to provide students in 191 with opportunities for success in many ways. We will be looking at how our educational system is serving some groups of students better than others. As we consider three areas, academic, discipline and behavior, and multilingual learning, you will see areas of strength, areas of growth, and areas of challenge. We ground ourselves first in the district strategic direction of developing ways that educators can strive to better address the diversity of learner needs. Educators are seeking to create systems that live out this district core value and actively build a responsive and equitable educational system. First, we'll take a look at the academics. Here's a glimpse of the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. Please be to know that the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments are a measure of how the system of curriculum and instruction are effectively serving students. As a public school, we seek to acknowledge and disrupt this legacy of underserving Black, Indigenous, and other students of color. We see here the ongoing disparity that continues to be a struggle in reading attainment. While the disparate gap continues, there continues to be growth for both our white students and our students of color. In this view, the disparity in proficiency in the system can be seen spread across various groups of students. I do want to offer another view. This one is focused on growth. It is here that you see, using data from our A reading assessment, our local assessment for reading comprehension, much more uniform impact of typical and aggressive growth among the different groups of students. With this view, you are able to see that our instructional programming does offer a more equitable opportunity for students to grow regardless of where they start. Using a data-based approach, we continue to invest in professional development, high-quality instructional materials, and evidence-based interventions and support. Some examples of this would be the intensive literacy training that over 350 staff are participating in as part of the READ Act, piloting an expansion of the flex win structures at the middle school, and the implementation of foundational literacy instruction in grades K through 5. We can also take a look at our academic achievement in math for students in grades 3 through 11 as measured by the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. Here you will see some of the similar disparities illustrating the systemic challenge of meeting diverse needs. With math proficiency as a gateway to access higher education and higher earning professions, educators we're always looking for those strategies that can be used to bridge the gaps. We can take a look at the same view as we did for reading for the different groups and notice that for some students we are experiencing smaller achievement disparities than in others. But I also want to share with you this view of growth using our A Math, our district district math assessment. Looking at the growth achievement, you see very similar attainments of growth over a year's worth of instruction for our students, regardless of where they began. Using the same approach, we continue to look at how do we improve math instruction. And we continue to look at what adjustments to instructional materials and programming can give us the greatest impact. Knowing that we have new state math standards moving to implementation next year, this year our high school staff have focused specifically on their classroom instruction in order to be prepared for those new standards and how they may better address those diverse needs in the classroom. They are continuing to do a study and review of their instructional materials and are looking to make recommendations at the end of next year. We continue to incorporate math intervention in our middle schools, having expanded our pilot of an online program, Exact Math, to all students in grades 6 through 8. We'll continue to measure that as we continue to expand our Flex Win intervention opportunities for students in the middle school.
Okay. During the first semester of 2024-25 school year, the disproportionality of suspensions between BIPOC and white students was 60%, meaning that BIPOC students were 60% more likely to be suspended than their white peers. While this remains a concern, it is a significant reduction from previous years, demonstrating on the progress and efforts to promote equitable discipline outcomes. As in previous years as well, the district has reported no expulsions from school. Over the past 3 years, the district has made substantial progress in reducing disciplinary disproportionality. In the 22-23 school year, the disproportionality rate stood at 110%, increasing to 118% in the 23-24 school year. However, by 24-25, it has dropped dramatically to 60%, marking a significant step towards equity in student discipline. This is nearly a 50% decrease of disproportionality, suggests that the proactive interventions and non-exclusionary discipline strategies and equity-based policies are having a meaningful impact. While there's still work to be done, this data indicates that the district is on the right path toward ensuring fair and equitable discipline for all students. The district's progress in reducing suspension is directly tied to the commitment to equity-driven initiatives and statewide frameworks, including the Minnesota Department of Education multi-tiered systems of support. Now in year 3 of implementation, the Minnesota MTSS focuses on reducing disciplinary disproportionality and providing early identification and intervention to support student success. Key district initiatives driving this include the MTSS committee work led by Jamie Howe and Morgan McDowell, subcommittees that have created and examined root causes of disciplinary disparities in school climate, academic success, and social-emotional behavior. Special emphasis has been placed on the chronic absenteeism and its impact on behavior, engagement, and family well-being. Positive behavior interventions and supports with most schools in year 2 and 3 of PBIS implementation, with teams working to shift from reactive discipline to proactive student support, ultimately reducing suspensions and expulsions. Student support teams and problem-solving models that have been implemented regular team meetings to analyze the behavioral trends and apply structured interventions, ensuring that students receive proactive support rather than punitive consequences. At the elementary level, the addition to our Student Systems Leadership Specialists, which is our SSLSs, has created a more structured approach to student support teams to utilize data effectively and address the root causes of student behavior challenges. This targeted support enhances the district's ability to implement equitable, evidence-based interventions that promote student success and well-being. The expansion of our board-certified behavioral analysis that the board approved additional BCBAs to align in the 23-24 school year has aligned behavior support systems across all schools, focusing on teacher training, student intervention strategies, and social-emotional well-being. And then, of course, our regular non-exclusionary discipline administrative meetings, which are ongoing collaboration among school and district leaders, ensures that discipline practices remain non-punitive, equitable, and aligned to the state guidelines. These initiatives are actively reducing suspensions, improving student support, and fostering a more equitable learning environment.
So we will shift over now to just look at some data about our multilingual student population. And so this should look similar to what we shared last year, but overall our ML enrollment has remained relatively stable from last school year to this school year. We currently have the 1,824 ML students. The elementary multilingual student enrollment did drop slightly. However, there was a slight increase in middle and high school numbers. A significant trend is the increasing number of multilingual students who are entering and emerging English learners. And the shift is really still continues to impact us in how we're responding to the needs of the students that we have. And so currently about 24% of our student population are multilingual learners who qualify for English learner services. So we continue to focus on increasing our staff capacity through professional development to better serve this group. This slide shows the 3-year trend for the number of students who are in the different WIDA, World Class Instructional Design Assessment proficiency levels. And so levels 1 and 2 really lean towards entering and emerging English learners, and levels 3 and 4 are those developing and expanding students. Most students need to have a 4.5 overall in 3 of the 4 categories to exit from ML programs or services. And so one of the things we've observed is a consistent increase in enrollment of students who are entering at that entering and emerging level, which is why some of the work we're doing now feels a little bit different, because we previously, I guess beyond the past 5 years, had more students who are in the level 3 and 4, which is the developing and expanding language levels. The data indicates overall that multilingual learner student enrollment has remained stable, and the programming that we provide for our students has really forced us to take time to learn more about the students, our multilingual students, and what types of things we can do to support Tier 1 instruction for all students, as well as those, the programming that our multilingual teachers also have to support language acquisition for students. The next slide, sorry. And so this slide shows the English language acquisition growth targets. And so when we were preparing for today, I wanted to share with you last year's numbers so that you could see those as well. And so this slide shows our 2022-23 data. And so the graph with the 191 logo is us, and the other graph is the state average. And so we had about 27% of our District 191 multilingual learners that were meeting or exceeding the language proficiency growth targets set by the state of Minnesota, in comparison to about 29% for the state last year. And then that was 73% of our District 191 students did not meet the language acquisition targets last year. But if you switch to the next slide, this shows our growth for the 23-24 school year. And so you can see there was a slight increase to the 28.4%, which is about a 1.8% increase in comparison to the 28.3%. We sort of caught up to where the state was with their proficiency levels, because they had a slight decline. The data suggests that there are challenges and barriers to support English language acquisition among our students, and some of these challenges we think include the different factors that go into the varying levels of prior English proficiency that students had before joining our school district. And we know that we still have work to do to improve the outcomes for students. And so, as I finish, I'll share some of the things that we are doing. There is one more data piece here that I wanted to share with you, because I didn't have this last year, but when we were looking at where are places that we're growing and showing improvement, one of the things that members of my team brought up was the seal of biliteracy testing. And so we have, that program in our state has been around for, 5 more years. It's been around a while, but you can see here that we're showing that in 2022 we had 10 students who participated in taking an assessment in another language other than English to receive a seal, which, depending on how they score on the exam, they have different levels of proficiency that they're granted, and that can connect to college credits at many of the 2-year or 4-year universities. And so you can see that we went from the 10 students in 2022 to 33 students in the 2024 school year. And then I also included a list of the different languages so that you can see the representation of what languages those students have the assessments in. And then the final slide is where I sort of bring together just a lot of the focus areas that we've tried to put a lot of our energy into to improve outcome. And so really, we spent time this year with communication and really ensuring that we're informing our families and our staff about our programming and how it works and how it supports, and then also having that translated in the languages. So we kind of revamped the information that we do in our annual mailing. We also spent time making sure that we're focused on professional learning for our ML teachers, and that's really about aligning their work with the WIDA language acquisition standards, but also with them aligning that with the academic standards to ensure that even though we're helping students learn English, we're still holding them to the same level of academic rigor that we are for other students. And then there's tiered interventions, and then we also spent time focusing on WIDA and academic standards alignment with the different content teams. And so middle school and high school has been doing this work because our elementary ML teachers are doing carry-all. And so we are hoping to continue that work with that group as well. And then the multilingual, like on-site support that we have embedded with our instructional coaches has really helped us give targeted support to our schools based on where they are and the needs that, they're showing in their areas of growth. And I think that ends our report. Unless you have questions.
Are there any comments or questions from board members? Director Mickelson?
Just one quick question for the discipline disproportionality. Just had a question for the 60, how and the 118, how this is weighted at all based on our total population of BIPOC versus white, or is it just straight 1-to-1 kinds of numbers? Just wanting to know whether or not it's weighted at all as far as getting that.
No, it's one-to-one number, so it just counts for one person. If you've been suspended once, it counts as one. If you've been suspended 3 times, it counts as one. So those are true numbers.
Yeah, gotcha. And just one last comment, just with the, A reading, A math, compared to MCA, the MCA is, this point in time, versus the others that really help to show that growth, which I think is, as you were saying, a real positive additional way of looking at the data and versus just that point in time, absolutely, working to get those MCA scores, that 18.5% and things too for that point in time. But I definitely agree, it's great to see the growth that we're seeing through all of our different students. And so, congratulations on all of that hard work throughout the year, getting those kinds of results for their growth.
Anyone else? Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Werb. Just a kind of a data question. In terms of the rubric that's used with discipline, that's remained constant across time in terms of what counts as
A suspension.
that unique event.
Yep, same data, same time, different year.
Different year. Thank you.
Yes.
Regarding the MCAs, because families can choose not to take them, does some of these numbers take out those that, like these are the scores of those that took the test, or does it take into account those that get an automatic 0 for declining to have the test taken?
The scores are the percent of students who are identified as being proficient, and so if students did not take the test, they are identified as 0.
So that includes those that decline to test at all.
That's correct.
Okay.
I will also say that our participation rates for our elementary schools is over 95%. So, and
great.
in our middle and high school, our middle schools still participate at a 90% or higher rate, and our high school, which would be for reading grade 10 and for math grade 11, are in the 80%. So we do have widespread, fairly high participation.
Any question? I had a question about the multi-literacy seal, and if that's only offered about, like, at the high school level? Because I've heard about it at the high school, but I'm not sure about elementary and middle school.
Yes, I believe that is a high school exam, and so I think even this year, we're starting earlier to advertise and help students know about that assessment. And so they share interest, and then they hold meetings to inform the students about the process. And it's kind of like cool and unique because it's not one company that does all these assessments, and so students have to inform the staff of what language they want to take the assessment in, and then they learn about what kinds of things that they'll have to simulate with writing, speaking, reading, in order to get those different seals. So we really have tried to ensure that we're spending more time and energy informing students, because there's a lot that comes with the benefits of that, which is less loans if you get, credits, and then also just to be proud of being a bilingual student and just what that brings, and having the documentation that you were able to test in an academic way and show your understanding is just amazing. So.
It really is one of those things that allows 11th and 12th graders to really demonstrate the asset that they bring to the table as a multilingual learner, and to not just simply be a speaker of another language, but it's a biliteracy seal, and so they really do have to demonstrate a high level of proficiency in all four of the domains. And so seeing 33% of our students in the variety of languages that they're able to demonstrate is, as Director Buchanan had said, it's a real asset, and a way for students to really demonstrate just how they can bring something from their own experiences and their own personal learning to the table for their benefit.
Thank you. Thanks. I just had one question about the test scores. Do you see any correlation between, like, when you see increased reading test scores and how that corresponds to, like, increased math scores?
There's not necessarily a direct correlation between increased reading and math. Some students seem to do incredibly well in one or the other, and then there are students who do incredibly well in both, and so there's really no direct correlation.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I don't have any other questions, but thank you for coming.
Great, thank you.
Next, we will receive a report with an overview of the proposed bond refunding resolution. Presenting this report this evening will be Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services, and Matthew Hammer, Eller's Senior Municipal Advisor. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Werb, Dr. Belmont, members of the board. As you may recall, last September, we began the same process. We actually passed the resolution to move forward to redo the bonds at that time. But before we could actually go out to market, the market kind of went south on us at that time. So we put a pause on that. Now we're back at the place where we're going to reinitiate that process and hopefully be able to issue those, I think, late April, May? May, yep. So I'm not going to steal all of Matthew's thunder. I will turn it over to him. But I do want to thank Matthew and his team at Ellers for helping us in navigating these times as the economy and conditions quickly may change on us. So when the opportunity is there to save our taxpayers money, we want to jump all over that as quickly as we can. So with that.
Yeah, thank you. Matt Hammer, District's Financial Advisor. Good evening, Chair Werb, members of the board, Dr. Belmont. Really here what we're tonight to the main point of our discussion is really saving taxpayer money. That's the goal, and that by law is when we look at a refunding or a refinancing, it's required by law that those savings go back to reduce future debt service levies for taxpayers. So as Stacy talked about, we explored this conversation last fall, and the market conditions changed, and now we're back with market conditions changing again. At that time, we were looking at only one of the district's issues, the 2015A issue. We'll talk a little bit about that as I go forward here. We're also now seeing the 2016 issue that had the same call date as another opportunity to create some future debt service levy savings. High-level refunding is similar to a home mortgage, albeit there's other requirements in law with state and federal requirements that make it a little bit more complex. When we think of bonds when they're sold, they come with what we call a call provision, and these bonds, until that point, under federal law, can't be financed with the current tax-exempt refunding until they get within 90 days of that call date. And that call date for both of these issues was February 1st of 2025. So we were within that 90-day window as of last November. And that's really what we were targeting originally when we were looking at the initial issue. We got to that time frame and the market conditions changed. Market conditions have now improved, and when we look at a refinancing, each one of the principal maturities will have a coupon rate or an interest rate associated with them. And as we look at these issues for school districts, sometimes it makes sense to look at all of an issue when you're looking at a refinancing, and sometimes it makes sense to look at only a portion of a bond issue for the maturities that make sense to refinance. You'll see in the resolution that you'll have later, we're giving ourselves the flexibility to refinance the entire issue as part of this, but it's likely that when we go to market in a month that we're going to only look at certain maturities that will have the optimum savings for the school districts as we try to manage the tax levies. We are going to be able to take advantage of the tax exemption, right, because we're past the call date. As I talked, the 2015 issue is one of the issues we're targeting. That dates back to the February 24 election, and those bonds were 64, a little over north of 64 million when they were originally issued. We're looking at about 51.6 million of that issue is going to become callable. And a portion of that, when you look at those interest rates, are anywhere from ranging from 3 to 4%. And right now, based on current market conditions, we're going to target those higher interest rate maturities as part of the refinancing when we look at going to market here in the next month. This was the bonds that the board actually authorized last fall to move forward with, and we put that on hold. The other issue that we're looking at is the issue that was in 2016. It was actually a refinancing or a refunding of two issues previously in 2007 and 2008 for alternative facilities that the district had authorized. That issue originally created some savings, and as I look back just for kind of historical perspective, over this 10-year period, starting with this issue, right, the district saved about $12 million over that period of time going through this process. And as we get to the end here, we're looking at generating based on current market conditions, between about $1.5 million and $2 million of additional savings is kind of our hope as we move forward here. This issue does have some coupons. Again, those coupons go out to 2033 in that 3 to 4% are interest rates. Again, we're going to look at certain maturities as part of this issue as an opportunity to refinance. The other thing that we continually do with the district is we analyze where we project the future debt levies of the school district to go, specifically the capital and debt service levies. And we're seeing an opportunity as we look forward into Taxes Payable 26 that we're going to be able to adjust the district's levies to move some of that principal forward. That's important because that's also going to allow us to pay off debt faster. And as part of that, you can kind of see that representation here where we're targeting actually in orange to move some of the principal and the existing debt forward through taxes payable 29. And then those bars that don't have any fill in them are actually reduced levies out in that future time frame that's creating some additional capacity. Now, as we've looked at this with the district, that capacity between 29 and 30 is kind of important as we kind of look at moving forward for potential some larger needs that the district might have or some other opportunities as the district continues with some of their strategic long-term planning. As we look at it as a whole, we're looking at in the neighborhood of up to $100 million of capacity for future capital projects without increasing taxes that potential capacity could create. So that's significant. And we're trying to manage the district's levies in a way that that allows us to create some of that capacity for future needs of the school district and try to manage tax rates to keep taxes where they're currently at least up to that about $100 million mark. So the time frame that we're looking at right now is the board is going to authorize tonight, later on, would authorize the addition of the 2016 ASU into that resolution. I have in here just a draft schedule. We were initially looking at a May 8th sale day for the school board meeting later that night. I think based on what we're seeing kind of as we look out in the market, we might shift that back, or we can then target your second meeting. And that's the reason for what we've pointed out in the resolution. It's a little different than the last one. You might see a parameter called out, which is a minimum savings target. That allows us to align the sale date to a different day in the market and try to capture maybe some less volume in a week as we look at what's happening from a volume perspective and what's out in that market to try to position the district the best to get the best interest rate at the time we go to sell. And then the bond closing would be about 3 weeks after. And then as part of the bond documents, there's a redemption period that has to be fulfilled before the bonds can be called. That's 35 days. So after closing, we have to wait 35 days to before we can call the other bonds and pay them off with the new bonds. So in essence, big picture, right? The goal of this whole thing is to reduce future debt service levies for taxpayers, create some savings, and then also manage within the district's levies to kind of manage to some strategic initiatives for the district as we move forward. So with that, I can answer any questions folks have about the process or anything even potentially about the, as you look at that resolution, that'll come later in the meeting.
Director Mickelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question. I'm assuming the answer is yes, this is net. The $1.5–2 million savings, I'm assuming, is after the costs of the reissue and everything that is net.
Issuance.
Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Werb. Just one comment. I appreciate forward-looking, given conversations that we're having and may have, down the road as it relates to facilities. In addition to the immediate savings of taxpayers' money, being able to incorporate that future into this conversation is really helpful.
We're always kind of looking with the district, right, and that's the alignment of working closely with Stacy and his team, right, on kind of what the district's looking at in the future to try to best position us to manage the tax levies of the property owners the best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we will be receiving a report about our district's written response to the vote of non-concurrence. On January 29th, 2025, the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee AIPAC voted the resolution of non-concurrence to express their views concerning all aspects of American Indian education and the educational needs of American Indian students enrolled in District 191 school and programs. Burnsville-Eagan-Savage School District 191 was presented with a letter of non-concurrence at the February 27, 2025 school board meeting. The American Indian Parent Advisory Committee outlined 5 areas of concern that led to the vote of non-concurrence and provided 5 recommendations to address the concerns. The school board was given 60 days from the receipt of the recommendation in which to respond in writing to each recommendation. Here to present on behalf of the Board of Education and District 191 is Isis Buchanan, Director of Educational Equity. Before she begins, we would like to acknowledge the thoughtful approach of AIPAC members that have had throughout increased awareness and understanding throughout the process, and hope that our work together will result in increased awareness and understanding of American Indian histories, cultures, and contributions, and better experiences for Indigenous students in District 191 schools.
Thank you. And so I will just sort of read from this following that. But just as a district, just know we're committed to ensuring that we work in partnership with our APAC to support and be more aware of American Indian history, culture, and contributions. And so the 5 recommendations are listed here. And so recommendation number 1 is to review disciplinary actions and review data about our middle school American Indian students, and then include in-depth, like, professional development related to American Indian cultural proficiency, to ensure that teachers are, and this kind of connects to the Dreamcatcher work that we've talked about before, but to ensure that we're not leaving out the cultural perspective about the needs of students. And actually, I was in a meeting today, and so some of the pieces that are listed here are in response because we were part of Dreamcatcher, but we'll continue to have our EduClimber. We've created a data wall to help us look at those students regularly and be able to know how they're doing and use that information with different groups of staff members. We will spend time creating a plan to look at student data specifically for the middle school level, and then sharing that with site administrators and having plans to share that data with the school staff, and then continuing to build and embed professional development training that's focused on American Indian culture, history, and language. We're, like today in the meeting I was in, like, we're feeling the impact of just even sharing information and having more people know about things that they can look for, questions they could ask, or even space to reflect that they can give students that align with, you know, the cultural needs of some of our students. Recommendation number 2 focused on more recognition by and from, like, individual school sites, so not just the district level, but like school sites promoting Indigenous Peoples Day and other observances of American Indian culture and heritage. And so working to create plans to have more active engagement by non-native staff, and then sharing the ISD 191 American Indian Education Program events with all students and families. I see a little typo there, so sorry for that. We'll fix it. And so our response as a district is to review our lessons about Indigenous Peoples Day. We'll be doing some of this work in collaboration with Lakeville School District over the summer, so that we're ending our school year already prepared with our revisions to some of the work that we're doing, and then also spending time creating plans to communicate lesson information to our site administrators, to have training for their teachers, and then for teachers to be prepared to share the lessons with their students. Recommendation number 3 was about the salaries of American Indian education programming staff and the need to have those come from the General Education Fund. And so reserving the program funding resources for its intended purpose, which American Indian students, because many other districts, such as Osseo 196 and Cottage Grove, pay their Indian education staff directly from their general education funding. And so the district response is that District 191 has a process for developing our budget as well, and we're in the middle of developing our fiscal year 26 budget, and we will review the source of funds used to pay for the American Indian Cultural Specialist and Indigenous Cultural Liaison, and then share the information with our APAC members so they're aware of how that funding is flowing together. Recommendation number 4 from APAC was to provide cultural space and staffing for a smudging space in each building, and that was in alignment with the Section 1 Minnesota statute listed there. And as a district, we have reviewed our policy 419 and made the updates to include the language regarding smudging, and then we also will work to seek clarification about the request to have the space and identify staff members, because we want to ensure that we're really understanding the request of the team, and then working to ensure that we're training staff about smudging practices. And it's sort of been something that's linked to our professional development that we already are doing, but to do that more and to ensure that there's someone at each site that has that training who could help support students in smudging if that's a practice that they would like to participate in. Recommendation number 5, provide cultural trunks for each school for staff to use for instruction. And this is representative of a request to impact all students, not just our American Indian students. And so the trunks are to be collection of culturally appropriate pieces provided by the district and approved by APAC. Currently, our 191 American Indian Education Program has one learning trunk that teachers across the district are able to check out throughout the year to help support their American Indian curriculum, and they include Ojibwe, Dakota, and Powwow trunks. And the trunks are in high demand in a variety of units that are being taught throughout the year, and it would be beneficial for us to have more access and for each site to have their own trunk when teaching American Indian state standards. And as a district, we will create a plan to look at what would be included in a cultural trunk for each site, and then identify those resources with our APAC. And then we would also review the budgetary costs that would mean to purchase the items, and then just establish a timeline. And that timeline will also be important because a lot of this will align with some of our standards. And so we want to make sure that we're adding to the level of rigor and the things that are already in standards for students at each grade level, and then connecting the resources to that standards alignment and, approval of our APAC members, so that we're making sure we meet our grade level outcomes for students.
Are there any comments or questions from board members? Director Al.
Just one comment. I know, this conversation we've had previously about other ethnic groups, cultural groups. Tonight it's APAC families, and we all own this work, right? It doesn't simply fall on the staff that maybe are designated to support our families. It's all staff, and I appreciate your detailing for our families and our community, how we're embedding that in that way, so that all staff is really making the most for first, our APAC students and for all students.
Thank you.
So I just, I have a question about establishing a timeline. So is there a timeline for establishing the timeline?
Well, some of this has to do, and I think at the previous board meeting, because I presented then as well, there is a grant that is being funded, and the Minnesota Humanities Center is supporting that. And so we've been working with Kathy Funston in our district and our APAC, and one of our co-chairs is here tonight. There's been a lot of information gathering and reading to help us find a partner to try to submit that. So I think some of it has to do with the immediate need is to just take the time to even make the plan of like, what do we mean when we say that, and to find out more about that. And so I think that I would say we would start some of the work now, but in the year with the plan, with the more detailed timeline, hopefully going into the summer, so that when we start in the fall, we kind of know where we are.
Right, because I think that's the important piece, is that we have these, we're going to have this done by this date, and, I mean, it's, important to have those set in place, so,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. We will now receive a report about the FY26 preliminary budget from Dr. Chris Belmont, Assistant Superintendent, and Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services. Welcome both.
Thank you, Chair Werb. Members of the board, Superintendent Battle remains steadfast in her commitment to taking direction from the board and partnering to present the best possible fiscal year 26 preliminary budget. So this is another checkpoint, another update around that umbrella of collaboration, prudent responsibility, transparency, and advocacy, which is Superintendent Battle's currently living that out while she's in DC, providing information and perspective to our Minnesota delegation. As the board probably knows, since long before COVID and continuing, Director Sovine is helping us navigate through the busy waters of budget forecasting and decision-making. So, to you, Director Sovine.
Okay. Bringing to you tonight pretty much the same presentation that we had at our last board meeting. We try to make sure that we're keeping you apprised of any updates that come from the state, as this is a funding year. No updates. So, I mean, everybody's kind of positioning themselves, but no formal action has taken place that will impact our budget at this point in time. So just to quickly review everything, we are looking at the timeline, what's affecting our budget for FY26, our current reality, approaches, as well as proposed adjustments. January through February, you passed the revised budget for FY25. That occurs every year after we complete our audit for the previous year. We update it with current staff, current enrollment, as well as the adjustments for our audit findings. You also received a report for our budget assumptions and parameter options moving forward. Earlier this month, we presented our initial budget recommendations. After we met at our last meeting, we went ahead and opened up the portal for community feedback online, and we'll start the process to review with staff and the community after spring break before we come back in April. Then, after we have all of the feedback, we will be coming back to you as well with any adjustments based upon that feedback, and then move forward to have a work session early June. And then, as you know, we have to adopt our budget prior to June 30th of 2025 for the following year. So one of the pieces that we always put out there, as you can see, inflation, if we were to continue to receive the money that we should in alignment with inflation, we would be receiving close to $1,400 more a year per pupil. So it continues to woefully fall behind. I know that Dr. Battle likes to put me on the spot often about the special ed cross subsidy, how much that is, and not to get too fine of a point on that. We are coming up on the 50th anniversary of IDEA, which the federal government made a commitment to help fully fund special ed. So if we were to take 50 years of missing the cross subsidy, that's a big number. And I don't have that off the top of my head either, but it's a big number. So just to let you know on that. Enrollment year over year, as you can see, we have continuing decline in enrollment since, well, prior to 2018, but these records go back that far. We are projecting next year to have an enrollment of about 7,021 students, K-12. That'll be a decline of roughly about 150 students. Other changes, again, you can see the areas on revenue, what we're expecting as far as increases. And then also in the right column, the increased expenses that we're projecting and what our budgets are based upon. Current reality, this slide is new based upon our last direction and kind of where we were falling. The revenue for FY26 will be about $158 million. The expenses, $169, $170 million. Unassigned fund balance, we're looking at $28.5 million or 16.8% if we were to do nothing. 26-27. 161 million for revenues, 175 million for expenses. Just to let you know, whenever we start looking out more than 1 year, the numbers become far more less precise. To address this, the board's direction was to reduce spending by 2.1 million, our budget by expenditures by 2.1 million, and then spend down our reserve by 9.3 million. So the $11.4 million gap that you see in the FY 25-26 amounts. So once we are done with the adjustments, our unassigned fund balance should end at about 30.3 million and roughly at about 18%, just a little over as far as reserve. So our strategies and values continue to work with cultural proficiency and inclusive partnership. We do provide resources for creating conditions to support the 191 strategic roadmap. We continue to maintain our class size parameters. We have not changed those parameters now for many years. Maintain balance in expenditures and revenue for restricted funds. In other words, we need to make sure that we are not spending more than we're taking in for the long run. Use of restricted funds before general undesignated funds. This has long been our practice. We use our title, our compensatory, our LTFM, ANI, all of the different areas that are restricted ALC funding. Maximize those funds before we step into the general. Reason being, our general undesignated funds provide the board with the most flexibility to use as needed at any given time. And then also to understand the ebb and flow of revenue streams and expenses. As we can see, even with the state's finances, we were high on the mountain and now we're heading down quickly. Maintaining class sizes, this is just a chart representing the elementary for our projection for next year with the staff of about 136 staff, roughly an estimated enrollment of 3216. So we're coming in at around 23.65 is kind of our average. Our average typically what we target is 24.5, but this is just the inefficiencies of the size of the buildings in which we have. 6-8 class sizes, not so much class sizes as 19.5 students per average class, 12 students per FTE. Again, as I pointed out, the same way for the high school. The number represents everybody. So you have your classroom teachers, you have your special ed teachers, you have your ML teachers, you have other staff that are working as far as intervention, reading development, and such that are working with the students. So those numbers represent everybody that is working with the students. Continue to offer for next year our pathway courses at BHS. Excuse me. Our avid social emotional learning, academic exploration at the middle schools, our Spark experiences, Associate of Arts degree at the high school, as well as 8 full-time advanced learning specialists at the elementary to help with our pathway programming there as well. Right sizing, we are looking to reduce 8.55 teachers, across K-12 to maintain our class sizes. So if we're looking at about 150 students less, 8 FTEs roughly. Again, it's just a little under 20 in that area. Next time that we meet, we will be bringing you the teacher reduction list, probationary release. We do that every spring. That number will be higher than 8.55, and that's for a number of different reasons. But 8.55 is the only need that we have from a budgetary standpoint. Excuse me. Additions, new teacher resources for supporting English learners, our Catalyst training, expanding middle school intervention. Again, this is through our school within a school. That's the restricted funds. So as we're able to continue to maximize our ALC programming that generates revenue, that we are turning around to support our middle school model with those restricted funds. Targeted support for students transitioning from the elementary to middle school and high school, and additional educational assistant hours to support technology distribution. So that is the 2 hours that we're looking at for the elementary buildings, for the media center EAs, to help with the collection and distribution of the technology. They're not going to be working on the technology, but we need a central clearinghouse point to make it more efficient. Other areas as far as adjustments for our secondary students, increase the walking distance from 1.5 to 2 miles, increase athletic fees by 15%, and reduce student services compliance and finance position at the district office, with those services being picked up in the finance department. This is a comprehensive list that can be downloaded with the link in a PDF format. This is kind of the balance sheet of what this will look like. So you can see at the projected 25-26, we're coming in at 18.15%, and roughly at the $30.36 million as far as our unassigned fund balance. The different categories, again, just to let you know, these are pretty much set for us through state and federal guidelines as far as our categories: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So the one that we talk about the most is our unassigned fund balance. Again, we have our survey feedback form is open. We'll close on April 18th. Through the rest of this month and April, we will be doing program-level parent meetings, presentations with different groups, as well as a presentation to all families and the public on April 16th at 6 p.m. here at Diamond Head. Okay.
Do board members have any questions or comments?
I just had one.
Director Hume?
So the last time we had this conversation, this is about the increase in the secondary walking distance, and I think you said there would be about 100 students impacted?
Roughly 100 students as far as routing. Yep.
Right. So since then, I've been wondering, is that 100 students who are currently riding the bus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there'd be more number than that are like already being driven to school or whatever. That's the number that are currently riding the bus that would need alternatives.
We would have like one less bus to cover 2 routes less, which would offset that cost for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Director Hume, I'm not sure we have the exact data on the frequency of
Sure.
how often those students do actually ride the bus, but they're routed. They're currently routed.
I know of at least one who almost never.
Okay. Thank you. Up next, we will hear a report about updating the board guidelines for sharing school board meetings. Presenting this report this evening will be Vice Chair Alt.
Thank you, Chair Ward. Yes, so basic notes on this particular guideline. Report was given about making changes to the guidelines January 27th, 2022. The guidelines were reviewed by the board during a workshop in September of 22, and then were approved in October of 2022. And what I'm bringing forward are suggestions for a change to this guideline. It is attached, let me pull it up. Here we go. You'll notice at the bottom, there is a reference to Policy 205, open meetings and closed meetings, as well as 206, public participation in school board meetings, complaints about persons at school board meetings, and data privacy considerations. So essentially, in terms of sharing the board meetings, what I'm recommending is that we change under regular and special board meetings. It'll still say all regular board meetings will be live streamed and recorded as possible. Then it goes on to say all special board meetings except those involving expulsions, superintendent searches, and filling a school board opening will be live streamed and recorded as possible. Further, there's clarification that special board meetings addressing student expulsions will not be recorded or live streamed, and adding to the guidelines, special board meetings whose purpose is to complete a superintendent search or to fill a school board opening will not be live streamed. Recordings will become public once the opening has been filled. And that was important because as a board, we want to be transparent. The thinking behind this change is that we want to make sure that the search and interview process is as equitable as possible, regardless of the order in which a person may be interviewed. All will have, will receive the same questions with the same newness as whether they're first, second, last, or whatever. So it's really just maintaining transparency, just delaying the posting of the recording. And that's what I have.
Do board members have any questions or comments?
I do. I know the answer to this is yes, but for the purpose of saying it out loud, these special meetings where we're interviewing superintendents candidates are still open meetings under the open meeting law.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Yeah,
So even though they're not live streamed, if members of the public wanted to come and observe, they would certainly be welcome to because it is still an open meeting.
Yes. Regular meetings, work sessions, and the special meetings are open, yes. Only the closed sessions are closed.
As I said, I knew the answer was yes, but wanted to say it out loud.
And a good question, yeah.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to move to our next agenda item, which is to share a report about our most recent board retreat. On Wednesday, March 19th, the ISD 191 School Board met for a retreat to discuss finding a replacement for Superintendent Dr. Battle. Earlier this month, Dr. Battle informed the district of her intention to retire at the end of her contract. The board discussed our options for either finding an interim superintendent or proceeding with a superintendent search that would begin with a new contract in July. The board came to the decision that we would move forward with a search. The board will be using the search services provided by MSBA. More information will be shared in the coming weeks with the search, including a community survey. Now it is time to receive updates on board committees, appointments, and school assignments. Do board members have any reports they wish to share?
Go for legislative committee. The legislative committee met on Tuesday, the 18th, and what we did was recapped our day on the Hill, meeting with our legislators and kind of understanding what proposed next steps were, and what the committee has proposed is sending a note and letter of thanks to our legislators that we've met with, or just all of them, and then reiterating the impact of the current budget decisions at the state and its impact on our district, and then also reminding them of bills that we want them to encourage to pass that would be in our benefit. And so that concludes that report. I can also speak for 917 too. It's hard because it feels like it was over a month ago, because our next meeting's next week on Tuesday. But when 917 met, they're also addressing financial constraints with the upcoming budget and are going through and determining what right sizing means for 917. But one thing that was really interesting to share is that we had the first cohort of our international teachers come in and present, and they shared about their experience and how much, even some of the similarities, because they're teachers in the Philippines, and now they're teaching here, and that they're in school, they're educated on the American education model, and to actually be here and teaching it in practice, they appreciated how welcoming the district was in bringing them in. They look forward to, and they love their students, and they are looking forward to continue their work in the district. So I thought that was exciting, and I know that they're looking to be welcoming another cohort, I think, in the future, and I know that's something maybe our district was considering if when facing teacher shortages, that this is something that's been working well. That's it.
Thank you. Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Werb. Policy Committee met last Tuesday, the 18th, and going through our regular review cycle of policies, and I do know that Dr. Battle and I are working to bring forward a separate cell phone policy per the full board conversation. That will be going to the policy committee either in April or in May. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then we meet next on Tuesday, April 22nd here at Diamond Head.
Any other reports? Is that it? Okay. We will now move to the business portion of our meeting. We will start by approving the consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold a discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Do board members wish to remove any items from the consent items? Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda? Moved by Director Anderson.
Second.
Second by Director Chester. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. In our first item under new business, we are being asked to adopt an amended and restated bond resolution. Presenting the resolution this evening will be Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you. Per the guidance of Ellers, with the presentation that we had earlier, it is my recommendation that the Board of Education adopt the attached amended and restated resolution related to the anticipated issuance of the school district's general obligation refunding bond series 2025-8. This resolution amends and restates the intent resolution initially adopted by the school board on October 10, 2024.
Is there a motion to approve the amended and restated bond resolution as presented this evening and in the board materials?
So moved.
Moved by Director Alt.
Second.
Second by Director Hume. Is there any discussion? Having been moved and seconded, this resolution will require a roll call vote. So in just a second, I will ask Sarah to call the roll, and when she calls your name, please respond with either an aye if you are in favor of the resolution or nay if you are opposed. Sarah, will you please make the roll call?
Director Hume?
Aye.
Director Mickelson?
Aye.
Director Alt?
Aye.
Chair Werb?
Aye.
Director Chester?
Aye.
Director Anderson?
Aye.
And Director Saxey?
Aye.
This resolution was declared duly passed and adopted. Up next will be a vote to formally approve the written response to the vote of non-concurrence. Presenting the recommendation will be Isis Buchanan, Director of Educational Equity.
Hello again, Chair Werb, Dr. Belmont, and members of the board. It is my recommendation that the board approve the written response to our American Indian Parent Committee in regards to their vote of non-concurrence and shared recommendations.
Is there a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the written response to the vote of non-concurrence?
So moved.
Moved by Director Anderson,
Seconded.
seconded by Director Mickelson. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. As outlined in the conclusion of our letter of response, the District 191 School Board deeply appreciates the collaboration and partnership shared with our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. The collaboration and engagement between our dedicated parents and staff members are paramount as we work to ensure we are meeting the needs of all American Indian students. Next, we are being asked to approve Policy 519, interviews of students by outside agencies. Presenting this recommendation this evening is Dr. Chris Belmont, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Ward. Members of the board, Policy 519. Some minor changes were presented and reviewed and discussed at the Policy Review Committee meeting on March 18th, 2025. They incorporate recent statutory changes that extend further protections for potential victims of child endangerment or abuse. Our administrators do from time to time lean pretty heavily on this policy, and we see good coherence between policy and practice right now.
Is there a motion to approve Policy 519?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume,
Second.
seconded by Director Chester. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Moving along, we are now being asked to approve on a first reading basis changes to policies 701, establishment and adoption of school district budget, 721, uniform grant guidance regarding federal revenue sources, and 704, development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and a fixed asset accounting system. Presenting the recommendation this evening will be Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Good evening again. Bringing forward to you three policy changes. MSBA made recommendations for the changes. They were reviewed and then brought forward to the PRC, Policy Review Committee, earlier this month, which then approved as well, and we're bringing to you tonight. It is my recommendation that the Board of Education approve on a first reading basis changes to Policy 701, establishment and adoption of school district budget. Policy 721, uniform grant guidance regarding federal revenue sources. Policy 704, development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and a fixed asset accounting system.
Is there a motion to approve the policies 701, 721, and 704?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume,
Second.
seconded by Director Alt. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Up next, we will consider approval on a first reading basis changes to policies 899, name school buildings or facilities, and 512, school-sponsored student publications and activities. Presenting the recommendation tonight will be Aaron Tinklenberg, Director of Communications.
Thank you, Chair Werb, Dr. Belmont, and members of the board. Presenting, as you said, Policy 899, naming school buildings or facilities, as well as 512, school-sponsored student publications and activities. For Policy 899, significant changes to build out that policy and better define the process of naming buildings and facilities, as well as some of the values and community engagement that are involved in that. And then Policy 512, just a small change to make sure that it's in line with state statute as recommended by MSBA. So I'm happy to recommend that the Board of Education approve both of these policies, Policy 899, naming school buildings and facilities, and Policy 512, school-sponsored student publications and activities as presented.
Is there a motion to approve policies 899 and 512?
So moved.
Moved by Director Anderson,
Seconded.
seconded by Director Mickelson. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Up next, we will consider formal approval of the selection of the Minnesota School Board Association for conducting the 2025 superintendent search. As I shared earlier in our board retreat, the decision was made to utilize MSBA's search services to conduct the ISD 191 superintendent search. Is there a motion to formally approve the selection of the Minnesota School Board Association for conducting the 2025 superintendent search?
So moved.
Moved by Director Saxey,
Second.
seconded by Director Chester. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Up next, we will consider approving updates to guidelines for sharing school board meetings. We already do this?
We haven't voted.
Oh, sorry. Presenting this recommendation will be Vice Chair Alt.
Thank you, Chair Burb.
We didn't talk about it.
Sorry.
That's okay. As discussed a few moments ago, the reason for making change is really to be more equitable in our interview process while still maintaining openness of our board meetings. The recommendation is that the Board of Education approves updates to the guidelines for sharing school board meetings.
Is there a motion to approve the suggested updates to the guidelines for sharing school board meetings?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume,
Second.
seconded by Director Chester. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Next on our agenda is a work session. We will be taking time to review and discuss the insurance plan review and the facilities needs assessment. I move that we take a brief recess and return to this agenda item at 8 p.m. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Anderson. Moved by myself, seconded by Director Anderson. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Please return to the dais at 8 p.m. to begin the work session. Everyone, it is time to start our work session on our insurance plan review. We will begin with a presentation from Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services, and George Vanderweet, One Digital Insurance Representative.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. We're getting close to the end of me presenting tonight, so that's the good news.
Hear about that?
Every 2 years, especially when we go out for our hit a bid, we come back to the board, present to you in a workshop setting the findings that we had, the recommendations from our benefit advisory committee. Our benefit advisory committee is made up of union representation, with the primary folks on there is 3 members for teachers, and then usually 1 to 2 members for the other units as well. So this group meets on a monthly basis. George pulls the information that we, all of our current usage for each month, brings back to the committee so that they're able to identify the trend lines, how many folks are reaching our stop loss and our aggregate, what that looks like, what type of direction we're heading, as well as educates folks, different trends that are coming up online or in the near future, and then helps support with any general questions and education that we can provide the rest of our employees. So we do appreciate One Digital and George and his support with our benefits group, and I'm going to turn it over to him so I don't steal his thunder.
Perfect. Well, so welcome, yes. So as Stacy alluded to, the Benefit Advisory Group is made up of representatives from each of the employment groups. We do meet on a monthly basis during the school year. So as part of the requirements under state statute on Minnesota 471.6161, the Health Insurance Transparency Act, or better known in the community as the HITA RFP process, we have a responsibility to seek proposals from various insurance carriers every other year. So that RFP process started on December 27th of 2024. We released the RFP to the marketplace. That is published in your local newspaper, but we also make sure that all of the carriers get the RFP as well, because most don't read the newspaper to determine when your RFP is released. The first round of the RFPs were due on January 17th of 2025. We opened those as part of an early morning committee meeting on January 20th, 2025. We assembled all of those results and then met with the committee and did an in-depth review on February 3rd. The best and final offers were due on February 13th. They were opened on the 14th, and then we had a committee meeting on March 13th. The first round of offers that we received were from UMR, which is a United Health company that is your incumbent health insurance third-party administrator. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota also provided a proposal, and then PEEP, or the Public Employee Insurance Pool, provided a proposal. Health Partners and Medica both declined to provide proposals. We reviewed the PEEP offer. It does not match existing plan design, so PEEP has very specific plans that they make available. The committee reviewed that, also with the understanding that that is not a self-insured option, made a decision not to pursue that, and the rating increase was north of 15% if we were to explore that particular option. The UMR United offer had a net increase to fixed cost of over 52%, with a second-year cap on our stop loss at 29%, and an increase to our administrative costs of 2.5%. Blue Cross offered a net increase on fixed cost of just north of 17%, with a second-year cap of 19.5% for our stop loss, with an administrative cap of 2.5%. Blue Cross also provided $200,000 of implementation money that would help with the transition if we were to make a decision to move from UMR for various upfront costs that we might have, or run-out costs that we would have with the transition.
Best and final offers were received by both UMR and Blue Cross. UMR did reduce their stop-loss rates, but they added 2 lasers. So lasers, for your reference, are higher stop-loss deductibles on particular individuals. So instead of having a $225,000 deductible for each individual, they had higher levels on 2 individuals. One that we know would have impacted our program because the individual has had significant high-cost claims over the course of time. The second one was more conditional if an individual had a particular procedure, like a kidney transplant or something to that nature. So that one was one where we didn't necessarily adjust our forecast because it was more of a conditional, but we did make sure that the committee was aware of that. By doing those 2 additional lasers, they were able to get their stop-loss program at about a 21% increase with a 19.5% cap. They did offer to hold their administrative rates for the 2-year period. Blue Cross did best and final as well. They reduced their fixed costs to just under 15%, and then they increased their stop-loss cap to 17%, and they're holding their admin rates for the 2 years. And again, they provided that $200,000 of implementation monies. We reviewed all of that with committee. We also looked at the stop-loss level. The current stop-loss level is $225,000 per individual. We did receive offers as part of the RFP process of $225,000 and $250,000. Based upon the fixed cost savings that existed, we thought it was appropriate to make a small adjustment to our stop-loss deductible from $225,000 to $250,000. That generated about $310,000 of additional savings on a fixed cost basis, with the understanding that it would have taken, or would take, about 12 individuals to have that additional stop-loss risk, and we haven't seen that many in the past or in our analytic data, so that seemed to be a safe bet to make that slight increase to our risk there. The benefit advisory group kind of reviewed both options because from an overall cost standpoint, they were both very competitive. There was a lot of conversation around the transition from Preferred 1 to UMR a few years back, the amount of struggle and issue that members had had, the overall experience, and the concern that some members might have just given up on fighting for their claims and the process around that. All of that being said, the committee was very adamant that if we had a very similar cost, that making a transition to Blue Cross was in the members' best interest from an experience standpoint. And so again, because overall costs were relatively similar, the decision was made, or the recommendation was made, to make a change from United or UMR to Blue Cross with this renewal. They also reviewed kind of the network to make sure that we didn't have any sort of issues around members not having access to care. The Blue Cross offer, as you can see, actually had a little larger network than the UMR network, so about 99% of prior claims would be considered in network with Blue Cross, where currently about 97% of our claims are in network. And so overall, the decision was made as a recommendation to move to Blue Cross and then to increase our overall premiums by 5%. So the funding increase for the upcoming year would be 5%. Medical trend, as you guys know, similar to most other inflation, is significantly higher than that. So from a plan perspective, a 5% increase to overall rates is actually a really good kind of renewal for us as a school district. And if you recall, when we visited last year, that was a different story. We had a significantly higher experience and a higher increase to rates. Questions on the medical before we maybe go to the dental?
Are you going to do any other additional review of the medical, or is that kind of it?
This is what, yeah, so if there are additional questions, we do have the insurance committee packet that was made available to you as well, so you could see the working papers and the documents that the committee and we reviewed with the committee.
Okay, no, I was just gonna say, as far as like, did you also look at the comparison between the programs as far as like the managed care and those types of things as well? Was that anything that was reviewed?
When you refer to managed care, what, or?
Just like disease management and stuff like that.
So, yeah, so the programs that exist between the United or UMR and Blue Cross are comparable in regards to if individuals have cancers or any other kinds of conditions. Yes, the outreach that happens around those programs is comparable.
Okay.
Yep.
So just trying to make sure those kind of, we're looking at making sure those kind of aligned and everything too. Okay.
And then plan design as well, so we did do the review of the plan design. Blue Cross did provide deviations in regards to what may be different on their program versus others. If anything, they were all, for the most part, improvements slightly. And then there are a number of federal and state mandated requirements that both carriers would have had to make adjustments to. Because we are a public entity, we must follow all federal and state requirements, even though we are self-insured.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one other question, if that's okay. And you might have already answered this, so I apologize.
I'm thinking about how teachers, other people who work for schools, need to do all of their procedures and things in the summer, right when this is going to be changing over, right? So people already have things scheduled that they know now is going to be covered by their current insurance. If this changes July 1st and they have a surgery scheduled for July 17th, do we feel confident that everything that's covered now under this insurance plan is going to be covered in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with the transition of carriers, new carriers will also put in what's called transition of care. So if there are existing scheduled procedures, or for that matter, even prescriptions, right? So there are individuals that might have had prior authorizations or other approvals for certain drugs. There's usually a transition of care period, sometimes 30 to 60 days after the start of the plan year, to allow for members to have access to their drugs and other things that there might be changes in the future on. So those members would be able to receive their care and or their prescriptions with maybe notification that, hey, this particular brand name would be changing, so we want you to outreach to your doctor in regards to that. Most of that's around the prescriptions. Scheduled procedures and things of that nature, Blue Cross would allow for that transition of care without issue.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions from the group? All right. So then the other program that we do review as well is just the dental plan. And so the insurance committee or the advisory group reviewed the RFP for our dental as well. So as part of a 5-year process, we do have to also look at all of the other ancillary services. So the dental was also reviewed. We looked at various carriers and networks around that. The district has been with Delta Dental for many, many years, and the experience that the committee members had shared was that it was such a positive experience that they really weren't interested in making a change. We have an adequate fund balance. The rates wouldn't be adjusted. The size of the network with Delta Dental was such that nobody was interested in really exploring a change in that carrier situation. We do look overall to make sure that the dental plan stays fully funded in the sense that our fund balance is adequate, and so we are making a recommendation for a small adjustment to the rates. I think it's been the first time in a long time, about 1.5%. So from a dental perspective, that's basically a rounding issue for the most part. It's very small if we think about the premiums, and then a 1.5%, but really just wanting to nudge to make sure that we have adequate funds in that particular program. But the decision or the recommendation would be to renew with Delta Dental with a small increase to the funding rates.
And just a reminder, both our medical and our dental plans are both self-funded. So when we're talking about a percentage increase or the reserve that we have in these, this is the reserve in which the district holds. Next steps with this, at our next meeting, I will be bringing forward the recommendations for Blue Cross Blue Shield as well as Delta, along with the percentage increase for our medical and dental, as well as our life and LTD. So that will come forward in our next meeting. The Benefit Committee has reviewed the information. This is their recommendation. I also review the information. I will also be bringing this recommendation from my position for you folks then to decide moving forward.
I'd just like to thank the committee. I know that this is a lot of time and commitment. And thank you, George, for, all the work you do. Appreciate it. I understand making a change to another health carrier is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of detail. I have a lot of faith in you, George. I know you'll monitor it, so. But I know that change is hard for people, especially when you change to a new carrier. I think that this will be a change for the better. And I hope that, the district employees will see that, especially with the change in service. Just wanted to tell you guys we appreciate it. So, thank you.
All right, no other questions? All right, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Okay, it's now time to move on to the Facilities Needs Assessment, and once again, Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services, will start our discussion off with a presentation.
More left here. All right, good evening, everybody. So, in the fall, we started having a discussion around our facilities. We had a closed session on safety and security, and then we had a work session to discuss the use of our open facilities and the proceeds, specifically the outlot out here in Diamond Head, and then also conversations around Metcalf Middle School and Sioux Trail Elementary and the anticipated closing of those projects as we were moving forward. Then in November, I brought before you a presentation kind of outlining some basic areas, and we'll go into many of those here. And from there, we started a needs assessment. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself on this as well. But our desire was to make sure that we were taking a planful, comprehensive approach to addressing these and our other facility needs. The purpose of all of this, 191 facility should address changing student needs and programming in a fashion that is welcoming, safe, and efficiently uses one-time capital expenses to reduce ongoing inefficient operational expenses, or otherwise known as overhead. So our hope is to identify and prioritize those needs for today in a manner that provides flexibility for the future. And also to make sure, as we've demonstrated earlier today already, to leverage our resources to maximize the use and efficacy of 191 facilities and resources. We are committed to our student learning and offering the best possible learning environments and opportunities for our students and families, creating a welcoming and safe buildings and spaces, and to engage our community in this process and hearing from many voices. We do look for an open and transparent communication and decision-making process, a cost-effective use of our facilities and resources, and reducing inequities in racially or socioeconomically identifiable schools. So our initial list, and when I say initial list, this is kind of at the higher level. This is our Director of Facilities and Operations, David Lake, myself, Chris, different folks that go out to the buildings. The experiences just in which we have heard about in an anecdotal way. We know that was out there. So that was kind of our initial list, okay? Very informal, but we did realize that we have structural changes to several of our front entrances that was needed, structural improvements for many of our buildings that are open concept. Through the late 60s, 70s, early 80s, open concept was the way schools were built. Open concept meant you had pretty much a big open space, and kids got to see kids all across the building, in a sense, you know, and everybody could hear everybody. And the idea was you were building community. We have community-built schools, okay? And that really was the idea with an open concept. You had the ability to integrate far more. Really good concept if you wanted to invest year over year over year professional development into maximizing that structure. And that's just not practical in the long run. And as needs change over time, we've also realized that not every student can function in a very open concept area without some type of borders. Okay? Redesigning parking, bus drop-off, parent pickup zones. Again, you know, back in the day when I went to school, you had maybe 5 families that dropped kids off, and that's just because the kid was still eating the Cheerios, and missed the bus more times than not. Oreos if you're really lucky.
They have Oreos.
Today, that is a primary source where parents are dropping off students and picking them up at the beginning and the end of the day. The zones for that were never designed for that traffic level. Also dedicated instructional spaces and secure entrances for early childhood at the 8 buildings and enterprise infrastructure. I say enterprise infrastructure, that is our wireless, our internet, electricity, plumbing, a number of different things that nobody really pays attention to, but it makes it very comfortable or uncomfortable for folks to function. So initial list for safety and facility updates included welcoming intuitive traffic flow, multiple layers of vision for security, vision, communication, and then also efficiency for dedicated personnel to make things happen. So every day, we don't have to empty out the closet, bring out all of the Project Kids material, set it up in the cafeteria or the gym, take it down before the rest of the students come in, then at the end of the day, take it out again, set it up, and then take it back down. That's one thing. Dropping cones off, making sure that bus traffic is going. Having people dedicated at entrances of buildings to actually open the door to let people in, you know, to make sure that they're secure. These are all examples that are currently going on where we're using a lot of our operational cost where a facility upgrade could address that. Again, we talked a little bit about open concept. You'd be surprised that a number of our schools don't have walls that go all the way to the ceiling, nor have doors. So those are both things that we would like to look at addressing in the future. We have already talked about the bus drop-off zones. Initial list, safety, security, again, the pre-kindergarten, and setting up hours. Looking at when kids are coming into the building or leaving the building to try to make sure that the building is secure, even though we have a lot of in and out throughout the day. And then also addressing the enterprise. So in December, Dave and I toured all of the buildings with the principals and the directors, and we created an initial list of what, from a principal standpoint, what are you seeing that would make instruction, improve instruction for your staff at this site? And we opened doors, we walked everywhere. I said, where does this room go? What does this do? Open stuff up, boom, there's kids in there. Or, oh, there's a staff in there. Isn't this a closet? This is a closet. This is where we have offices right now. Or we're creating small and flexible instructional spaces using our online panels, because that's the division. You know, we're taking regular classrooms that create the others. So then after December, then Dave and I went and we met with all the building leadership teams. And we said, all right, in December, we met with all the principals. What do we need to add to this list? From your perspective as a teacher in the building, what is missing? what needs to be addressed, and a number of different things were added as well. Then also in February, we opened it up to community members and coaches and boosters for our athletics, because not only do we have issues inside of our buildings, we have some issues outside of our buildings as well. All in all, 695 different items were identified across the district. They're not prioritized. Some buildings may not have mentioned something that another building did. That doesn't mean that there isn't a need, but folks just didn't see that as the biggest need for them at that point in time. I gave you two different tables. Again, just tried to put a target phrase with the ideas, just to consolidate the list a little bit so that it was a little bit more manageable. You can see the number of different areas that we were to look at, bus drop-off zones, number of folks that identified that at each of the different sites, clustering departments. Electrical outlets would be one of those things. While it may not have been identified at every building, I can guarantee you most of them don't have more than 3 outlets, which is horrible in a technology era. Field upgrades, flexible instructional spaces. Probably the biggest one that was surprising was, one, the field upgrades. We need more gym space. Middle school, high school, we need some restructuring on the floor type. The community uses our facilities a lot, and some of what we're able to offer is very limiting. Bathrooms, that was a high flyer, and for a number of different reasons. Bathrooms that had used badge access or secure bathrooms, more bathrooms in areas where we have special ed students or young students, kindergarten students, VPK students. Just across the board, that one was over and over and over again. We need to address the restrooms and what that looks like. That was probably the largest unexpected area, but again, that's why we went out and did this across the board. Office spaces, meeting spaces, flexible learning, we've talked about that a little bit, storage needs as well. Again, most of our buildings were designed and built almost 50 to 60 years ago, where you would have a traditional classroom of 900 square feet. You probably had your principal, you had your clerical staff, a nurse. That was about it in your front office. Now we have a lot more folks. We have our liaisons. We have volunteers that are coordinated within the building, social workers, psychologists, a number of different individuals that need office spaces and spaces where they can meet with students and families in privacy. Okay. Also the flexible learning spaces. Again, 900 square feet is too much for a group of between 8 to 12 students that may need to be pulled out for reading development, intervention, language, special ed. And the way that buildings are making do is, like I said, they're splitting the larger classrooms, but it's still, when students that are needing the flexible space, the distraction is even compounded. And so the needs of education have changed over time. And that's just what was reflected in our list here as a whole. Okay. Again, for the community, they can download the entire list. It's unedited. It's what folks wrote. That's what we're reporting. So how do we do projects now? So the majority of our projects are planned through LTFM. It's in a 10-year strategy. Those projects are reevaluated every year. If we're thinking we're going to need to replace a roof, and we're planning on that in 3 years, but come 3 years, it's like, no, actually when we look at the roof, it probably could last another 4 or 5 years. So we're going to bump something up from further down the list, advance it, and readjust. We're always reevaluating, but we are also planning for the long term. Sometimes projects simply are unexpected. Enrollment shifts, special needs. breakdowns, malfunctions. We talked about this during our budgeting process, LTFM. Just the number of different types of pumps throughout the district for either air or fluid, and how expensive they are to replace. And again, when you're looking at buildings that are half a century old, they tend to give way. And also changing programming pressures. Some projects do fall outside of LTFM. LTFM is for replacement. So if I need to replace a roof that's already there, I can replace the roof. I can't use LTFM to expand a roof. Okay, so I can only replace what is there. Annual operations department would pick up sometimes, so we set aside money there. Safe schools budget sometimes will pick up things. A lot of times that'll be around our security cameras, different things that could fall under that use. Special education if we have other needs, students that are in the district, the addition of a focus program, whatever it may be, maybe the need for a restroom again, reassigning unassigned funds, and then also bond referendums would be different sources of revenue. So the first bullet under the gray is what we've just completed as far as kind of a needs assessment, giving you a large view of everything that could be done throughout the district. I did ask folks to put it in the form of a need, not a solution. Trying to help them understand if you put it down as a solution, if we get to the point where we have a design team that's looking at all of our needs, you're leaving it up to them to try to interpret the solution as to what they're really trying to solve. Because when a design team looks at all the different needs, from an efficiency standpoint, they're going to try to meet multiple needs in the least expensive, most efficient way possible. So where we are now is the darker portion, where in the next 1 to 2 months, we will, if you folks want us to move forward, pull together a guiding change document, which is really showing the parameters, the desired outcomes, what would be acceptable, what's not acceptable, moving forward, and along with that, developing a plan for a design team, which would create a number of options for the board to choose from, and also a feedback loop and a timeline where the design team would then go back to other folks, gather input, refine their options, and continue that refinement process before they bring to you the final option list. So it's cyclical in its way. You know, the team becomes an expert, understands completely all the needs, the ramifications, the cost, contracting needs, future enrollment, everything along that line. They start developing their initial list, then they would go out to different target groups, get feedback, refine that list again. One more time, go back out for feedback. Did we hit the mark? Yep. Come back, refine it again, and then when they felt they were at a good place, they would bring it forward to the board. Okay? So the next 1 to 2 months, that's where we would focus on developing the guiding change document and that timeline for a design team. After that, then the board, or really quite frankly during that same time frame, if we do move forward with this, the board probably will need to start considering funding options and what that might look like. There we go. So that's my presentation.
I don't know, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts, because that's a long list of stuff.
Can I ask a question quick? So under the identified needs, you know, it lists just bus drop zones. It didn't indicate like parent drop-off, which is what I understand is like the routing issue. Is that included in that? Okay.
I tried to condense it so that I could use a pivot table. I'm just nerdy that way, but just so that it could be presentable.
Mhm.
So yeah, it does encompass that.
Okay. Yeah. Parent drop-off.
Anyone else have questions? Or?
So what we're talking about is fairly large-scale facility upgrade. My microphone. I'd like, in past iterations of projects of this scale, we also received information about enrollment and capacity. And I'd like to make sure that embedded in this, we know that the guiding change document, the information that comes to us, accounts clearly for building capacity, because is it a facility need or is it a capacity demand? In some cases, it could be one or the other.
It's a usage, more of a need, honestly. And that would be included in our guiding change document to make sure, again, looking at the future enrollment, looking at transportation costs, boundaries, a number of different things on how we might mitigate and address the issues. If we were to just try to take student for a lot of our facilities by square footage, you might say, well, you have the square footage. The problem is, it's not the right type of square footage anymore.
Right.
So that is the real issue. And it's kind of like, and that's probably going to be the toughest piece to navigate, is even with facilities that we currently have that are vacant, it just gives me more a bad, because it's still not designed for the needs that we have today.
Right.
We need to address the facilities that we have and make sure that they're going to last for the next 20 to 25 years with the flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's, yes, so the enrollment definitely would be a part of it. But I just want to, some of the old models of, 350 students, you have a 3-section, 400 students, you have a 4-section building, but it doesn't take into account everything that's going on in education anymore.
Right. And I think what I was, and I did actually read through that whole long list of needs. I'm not nerdy enough. And what I was seeing was clearly it's a brick and mortar question of space. Mm-hmm. We know that enrollment has been flat to declining. Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure, taking a look at the long haul, that we're taking into account, and even, boundaries, I was going to bring up boundaries as well, that we might want to think about looking at our boundaries policy, because I can't remember if it was MSBA or one of the consultants that met with us years back, that suggested it might be healthier if a school district looks at their boundaries on a regular cycle, rather than just, oh, here we are, we have a need. And, whether it's boundaries, variances, make sure that we're managing our school spaces and our classrooms so that the students really, learning is optimized. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, the outlets, the bathrooms, that's not a question of how many students there are. It's to your point, real need, and also the changed learning environment.
Yep.
But yeah, that would be my ask.
Yep. And I do have a draft for the guiding change document. We might be able to move that along a little bit earlier. As far as the time frame of what that cycle would look like for a design team, that will take a little bit more. So that give a little bit of time. We have a lot of things on our plate at the moment. I also want to put out there that Matthew indicated that we are also looking there and leveraging our resources that the district does have available. I don't know if you picked up on that. In the next couple of years, without an additional burden to taxpayers, there is you have some resources to work with to address some of these needs.
If I could make another comment. Mm-hmm. Just putting a pin in the conversation, it seems like those needs spoke to some of the list, the items on the list spoke in part to perhaps staffing resources or roles and responsibilities that maybe we as a system need to look at and consider.
Yeah, no, it's, again, the design team is really, I want them to kind of work through the process and be the ones bringing back to you the recommendations. That's the real way to go with that. But we do know we have some spaces in our buildings that aren't used in the same way that they were even 15 years ago, which is a lot of square footage that may be able to be repurposed in some of these sites. But again, as far as everything gets bumped. So if we're looking for instructional spaces may go into some of the smaller rooms, which used to be offices. Those folks end up in, not little closets, but
Stores.
Closets. And then you kind of see everything that was in the closet suddenly is everywhere else. Whether it may be in the hallway, whether it's stacked up or whatever. And it's just like, our teachers are working hard. But quite frankly, as we toured the buildings, a lot of their energy is spent working against the facilities. I don't have another way of putting it. If we can address and give our teachers the equipment that they need or the facilities that they need, I think you're also going to see the results that you're hoping for.
So, just because I have not seen us with a list like this before.
Right.
So, just questions like, so would we find like this type of a list like in other districts? Like, I mean, this is just like, would you, if you went out to any other district and said, hey, can you give me a list of everything that you guys want to fix? Would we expect to get a large list like this? And I mean, this is not unusual. Would you say this is not unusual to have this many things that people want?
It depends on the district. And I want to be clear, yes, that's where the design team would come into play. Some of these are desires, this would really be great, and some of them are truly needs.
Needs, okay.
So that's where the design team would say, okay, if we do this, we're going to be able to address probably these 5 issues, or 6 issues, or whatever it may be. And what about this one over here? Don't know where we can fit that in. Is that going to be crucial? Maybe not immediately.
Right.
So your design team will prioritize and try to bring you back recommendations within the scope that you folks provide them to best meet that. Not everything has to happen right now, but some things probably should sooner than later.
Right, so
To your question, comparable districts with our age for our buildings very well could come back with this type of a list. If we're looking at some of the suburbs that are fairly young, athletic fields. I mean, you can look at some of the other districts, oh my gosh, the complexes would compete with a small community college. And we're trying to function on fields that slope and aren't even regulation size because we're landlocked in those senses. So it depends to your question.
right. So when we finally get to that point where the team comes back and then we're sitting here and we're like, oh, do we upgrade fields or do we upgrade bathrooms? And we're trying to decide, then.
Yeah, the team, again, the guiding change document will provide that desired, what's called an end in mind, more of an end in mind. So it's that idea of, we want to make sure that our buildings, and this goes back to like the front end of our presentations, they're welcoming, they're safe, they're secure, they're functional, they're flexible for the next 20 years, okay, 25 years. The design team will kind of have that guiding question and try to address that big piece. And they will bring back not just one solution, they should bring back several different options in which you can kind of ask questions and vet through. And they'll say, okay, this one has this price tag, and it's going to have these type of implications. This one will look like this. And they will help through their options and their design to help prioritize that for you.
Right, it seems like with it being such a large list, and I'm sure with them doing the work to try and, determine which things are actual needs, even after they whittle that down, it's still going to be a larger list. And I can just see where it might be difficult to still try and decide which one is more important than another, because there's still going to be things, it's still going to be a larger list. I don't know. I'm just thinking about, probably getting the cart in front of the horse.
Well, and that's where we want to make sure on our guiding change document, we're about as tight as we can be, because the last thing we want to do is invest a whole lot of time with the design team and the feedback loops and the community to bring back options that people feel pretty good about. And it comes to you and you kind of say, we can't do that price point. I'd much rather have an idea of what is our scope that they can work with it. That'll be a part of the parameters. And that's where we can have further discussions. We can bring Ellers back out where they can help us map out, okay, where is a path here that we can maximize our resources with a low tax burden and we can try to distribute to our greatest needs.
Quick question to clarify too.
Yep.
We have this long list.
Yep.
And we have your slide deck with what I understand to be what you're coming forward with as an initial scope for what the design team might be looking at. Safety and facility update slide. Yep. Initial list of identified safety and facility updates. What you have here is what you would ostensibly bring back to a guiding change document, the design team. We're not talking about the full list.
The full list was really at this point in time for you to understand we have great need.
Yes.
Okay. The design team will start within those parameters, trying to narrow it down to address as much as they can within the parameters that you provide them.
So what you've presented is not the top of the funnel. We're looking at the list.
No, what I provided you was everybody just kind of saying, bleh.
Right, but you didn't, like, there, and I guess this is where I'm confused.
Okay.
There are elements in the list which don't appear on your slides, and so that led me to believe that these slides that you're presenting are kind of the initial brushstroke of what you and the team would be working on, not including the items that are in that lengthy list.
The majority of this presentation is a recap of, or pretty much the same presentation that we did back in November. So it was just a regrounding. So a lot of the stuff that was on the list was kind of that anecdotal stuff, things that I've seen, Dave has seen.
Yep.
And initially, we were classifying it in that, okay? And so it's almost like a research, that was our hypothesis. These are our areas of need. Then we went out and met with everybody, collected data, and, it's more than what we anticipated.
So then in the list, we also had additions on buildings.
Possibly.
Okay.
And again, as much as I tried to push, do the need, not the solution.
Correct, yep.
So
yep.
some folks still said, we just need more space. Well, okay, that's one thing, saying I need more space, but then folks kind of went in, well, we need to build this.
Right.
Well, that's the solution. Let's not
Okay.
get there yet.
So I guess I just want to make sure that when, the next time something comes back to us, it's going to be kind of clear what the top of the funnel is that we're eventually going to be working down to.
Yeah, that's not my job. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. That really is going to be the scope of the guiding change.
Yep.
and then the work of the design team to
Right.
prioritize and try to meet that guiding change document. I don't want to limit the ability of the group to.
We're saying we're in vehement agreement, yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're in vehement agreement.
right.
Understood, it's not you.
Right. So I just, it's going to take some time to get there.
It just kind of seems, if I'm not mistaken, that it's, the initial kind of slides where it was talking about the, here are the different updates and the kind of categories of the updates were kind of what you were assuming you were going to, and kind of like, I'm pretty sure these are the things we're going to hear about and the needs, and that then that pivot table with all the identified needs, that's the top of the funnel.
That's
That is like that,
expansive.
oh yeah, bathrooms are on here, okay, that's
Right.
kind of the top, and that, okay, now we're
Yep.
going back, okay, yep.
Yeah. And again, some of the ADA type of stuff, things that wasn't even on our radar, but for folks who are lifting wheelchairs on a daily basis, to get over a couple of steps. Like, what? These are the things we're discovering as we're getting out there, so.
So, trying to wrap my brain around this. Okay, so are trying to figure out what the cart and the horse is. So like, is the horse what you want from us? Like, is the like some sort of boundary parameter, like, thing that would help the guiding change document? Like, are you looking for like a dollar sign?
I will be able to bring you back at within the next month here, when there's time with everything else that's going on, bring you back a guiding change draft for you to review, okay? And instead of necessarily putting a dollar amount, we have a phrase that's in there where it says, we will not put undue hardship upon the community, okay?
Okay.
But then I have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is undue?
Right.
So I will need a little guidance on that. You don't necessarily have to put a dollar amount,
Yeah.
but we do have to kind of tighten it up, because, the easiest solution is 15 brand-new buildings.
Right.
That's not what you're going to give me.
That ain't easy.
Right? So I want the team to kind of know what their sandbox is. Best way I try to do visual pictures. It's like your kitchen. If you wanted to update or renew your kitchen, well, a lot of things that really could be fixed. And then you're going to sit down and kind of do the pencil. Well, this is roughly what we can afford.
Right.
So you're sticking with the olive green refrigerator, but you're going to replace all of the cabinetry? Fine, whatever, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then kind of coincide with that with the dollar signs is what I'm thinking about. Because, with the, hopefully we'll close on Metcalf or whatever, we have those funds and such. And we also have long-term maintenance facilities money. So looking at this now, huge list of needs is part of the role, because like I personally don't know, this need could actually be funneled into long-term facilities management. So then, but here are some that are kind of like don't fit some of these other buckets that maybe this bucket of money might be, and then that's how we can kind of define our boundaries for you.
Right. And again, I would recommend that somewhere within the next 2 months, we do bring Matt back. Again, tonight was a little bit packed, as the picture gets a little bit clearer for them as well. They can help you become glossy-eyed real quick, but they have some really good news that if we plan and manage correctly, we can generate a fairly large capacity without a burden to the taxpayers. And it would be maximizing our LTFM. It would be paying off bonds quicker than later. It would be doing a number of different steps. So with that, though, he kind of said 2930 was kind of a target area where we start having things. So that would also help start mapping out when are we really ready to redo the kitchen. Some of those type of conversations as well.
We can fix it.
And I think options will be important, and you know that.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
The time is now, oops. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I don't have to do that. Thank you, everyone. It is now time to move on to, wait, no, that's sorry. This concludes our work session. The final item on our agenda is a closed session as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.03 to discuss labor negotiation strategy. Is there a motion to close the meeting at this time to discuss labor negotiation strategy?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume.
Second.
Second by Director Alt. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. The time is now 8:56, and we will move to the HR conference room to discuss labor negotiation strategy and return to our open meeting immediately following the closed session. However, please note that having no further agenda items after the closed session, we will not be returning to the dais upon completion of the meeting.